Writers, readers, drinkers, lend me your ears and your livers. Welcome to Writers Drinking Whiskey Open Bar, your boozy author panel, the show where the only things killed are fictional characters and every bottle within reach. I am your host who wields the red pen with impunity, William R. Hincy, and joining me today, we have a truly thrilling cast. So let's meet them. Panel, hello.
Hey, hello.
Good to be here.
Very good. Thanks so much for being here. And so, with keeping with the tradition of the show, I have a fun game to get us started. I will, of course, include in the description. You'll have the links to each of your show, your main show on the channel, and then your bios down there. But I wanted to have a little fun, introduce us to the audience. So we'll start with a little game. I like to call it bedside, curbside, or down the aisle. So it's what books or what author do you want to keep at your bed for the night? Which one are you marrying and which one are you kicking to the curb? Our choices for tonight. And I'll embarrass myself first. So then all of you will be, very fine from there. So your choices are Arthur Conan Doyle, Agatha Christie, and Edgar Allan Poe. And being that I came up with this game, you would think that perhaps I would have thought about this beforehand, but as I just said all of that, I realized I had not. So I think, though, if I had to kick someone to the curb, man, that's a hard one. But that I'm kind of a loosey-goosey guy, it would probably be Arthur Conan Doyle, just because he's too intellectual and smart for me. He would get annoyed with me very quickly, so I would put him at the curb. Edgar Allan Poe's brilliant, but he's also very dark. So I'm thinking one night that's going to be some bedtime reading. We're together one night, and then I guess I'd be marrying Agatha Christie, which she's had some crazy stuff in her life, and that probably fits my dating history. So I guess I'll stick with that. So maybe then we can switch. And actually, because I need to say a special thanks real quick here to Mr. James Grady, who put me in contact with the other great guests I have on here. So this whole episode wouldn't exist if not for you. So thanks so much for that. And maybe for that, we can start with you with the game.
Oh, sure. I think I'd have to kick to the curb Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, while he's brilliant, I just don't feel like he would hook me as long and as well as the other two. And I'm with you. I think I would. Agatha Christie's far more romantic than Arthur Conan Doyle, and so sure. I guess whatever's left for Arthur Conan Doyle and I to discover, Sherlock will lead the way.
Very good. Very good. So then maybe SJ, we can swing over to you.
Yeah, I would have to kick Poe to the curb too, because he was so nuts. All his poetry rhymed, and so he's got to go. I would keep Arthur Conan Doyle on the bedside, because as much as I love Sherlock, and I do, a little of that goes a long way. Don't tell the Sherlockians I said so. And I would have to marry Agatha Christie, although it would be a platonic marriage. But they're doing that these days, aren't they?
Sure.
I mean, that's one of the things.
She could be in your polycule.
Yeah. right. Because she is consistently interesting, and her understanding of motive is beyond, she never gets enough credit for that. So that's how I would do it.
Very good. Thanks for that. And you want to take us from there, Kier?
I think I'm with you that I've got to kick Doyle to the curb in that, again, a little bloodless for me, and I didn't, I'm probably the least traditional mystery author out there. I mean, I'm kind of mystery adjacent, and what attracted me to mystery and crime fiction in the first place was really not the traditional mystery, is not clue-based stuff. It was more stuff like Jim Crumley and, the great poet Dick Hugo wrote One Great Mystery, and I just like, I like stuff that's seeped in atmosphere and weirdness. And so I think that, I'm getting hitched to Poe here. I think that's, it's, maybe not the best writer in the room, but to me, one of the most fascinating weird brains of the three. And then I do love a Christie once in a while. So I can definitely have a one night stand with Agatha.
Very good. And that takes us to you, John.
So what are my choices? Curb. What are the three choices?
It's curbside, bedside, or down the aisle.
Okay. It's all about marketing. It's all about that photograph. So I'm getting the big round bid, and we're all going to be there because I'm not taking my eyes off of Poe. I think you all are silly to do that because you gotta keep your eyes there. We're all going to get naked. We're just going to get there for the photo. And then what happens after the photo? It's the 21st century. So, that's, we don't know. It goes to People magazine. It goes to, and we're trending. And we're on every television show, and there's a reality show that comes after it. We're making millions of bucks off of this thing.
Very good. You're on the cover of Rolling Stone for sure.
There you go. There you go.
You've already booked it. So awesome. So thanks so much for that. So let's get then to the first question of the day. Round one here is killing off characters. Killing off characters, this can be very specifically, preferably your own work, but you can also be more general. But what are some considerations and when you want to kill off a character? How do you do it in a way that serves the story and is emotionally resonant for the reader? So, and then we started with Jim last time. So maybe I'll actually, John, you went last time. So let's have you go first now.
Well, there's killing off characters and there's killing off characters. I write thrillers, so there's quite a few people who die in my books. Not all of them are meaningful. There are utilitarian deaths. There are, in one book, it's called Total Mayhem. I think in the opening scene, there are 200 people killed. 2 or 3 are actually killed with purpose. The secret to making the audience care is to give them, even in a paragraph or two, something meaningful. And in that, the opening paragraphs are a terrorist behind a scoreboard of a high school football game and just opening up on people in the stands. And it's viewed through somebody who's sitting there that hears somebody sounds like they're coughing, and there's a very concerned husband trying to figure out what's wrong with his wife. And then it kind of escalates from there. Jonathan Grave is a freelance hostage rescue specialist, and he ends up through the course of his work, he kills a lot of people. They're always bad guys, but there's a karmic cost to all of that. And, some of you want to have them die, the bad guys, when they die, you build it up so that the audience be really disappointed if they didn't die. But there's one scene I had where he killed a fellow because they're about to launch this operation that's going to be rescuing a bunch of kids from cartel members, and a cartel guard who didn't necessarily want to be a guard, but he was armed and he was the bad guy because he was a cartel guy, and he was relieving himself. He just and he was in a position that if he wasn't killed, he would reveal everything that was about to happen. So he had to die. The only smart thing to do was to kill him. And in that case, it really cost Jonathan something. Emotionally, it was a hard thing to do. It was the only thing to do, but it was hard to do. So in killing off a character, from the other character's point of view, I think there's always a cost. From the reader's point of view, it just has to be justified. I think if you kill off a good guy, it's like killing off a dog or a child. You better have a really good reason for it.
Sure.
And the payoff has to be, huge in order to, because you're going to alienate the audience at that moment, unless the reason for it is huge, or the payoff afterwards, the revenge is huge.
I want to be an extra in a John Gilstrap movie, and I want my role to be utilitarian death number 200.
That'd be brilliant. Oh, maybe all of us could. We could just have like a nice open bar recording with all.
I mean, can we all be in it, please?
Yes, but it's going to be in that big round bed.
Yeah. Well, okay. Under that circumstance, everybody started out dead. If you think, well, okay, now that's really creepy.
It moves away from utilitarian at that, I think.
Very, very true. Awesome. So you want to take us from there, SJ?
Yeah, because John mentioned killing the dog. In what I write, it's not it's a different genre from what John writes, and all the deaths have motives behind them. Although some of them also are, oh Jesus, that guy was in the wrong place at the wrong time, so somebody had to kill him. But it's the bad guy who does that, and then eventually you have to catch up with the bad guy. Although my bad guys are also, all the bad guys think they're good guys, and some of them don't like to be killing people, but they can't see another way out, and so on. But what I wanted to say was, I'm now co-writing. I have this new book, The Murder of Mr. Ma, and we just finished the second book, me and my co-author. And when he sent,
very cool, congrats.
Yeah, it's being edited now. And when he sent me the outline, this was back months and months and months ago, because that's the deal. He writes the outlines and I write the book. And I got to the part where they discover the mooncakes are poisoned. And how do they discover the mooncakes are poisoned? Someone feeds one to the dog and the dog dies. And I called him up and said, no. We're not killing the dog, and we're especially not killing the dog just to find out the mooncakes are poisoned. This is not happening. I had to come up with a whole, way to, because the dog by then was, a character. I had to come up with a way to find out that the mooncakes are poisoned that involved the dog, that didn't involve killing the dog. And even now, what's funny is that we also have a kung fu consultant on this book, and in the final big giant fight where everybody's fighting everybody, and they're using it's Russian Cossacks and Japanese Ronin and Chinese kung fu guys and boxers and the dog is there, and somebody tries to kill the dog. Even the kung fu consultant is trying to kill the dog. It's like, leave the dog alone. But the dog survives. I just want everybody to know, if you read the second book, the dog survives.
Never kill a dog in a book.
Never kill the dog, for God's sake.
Yeah. Oh, dude, the one movie, and I don't watch it to this day. I have a list of movies. Actually last night we watched Iron Eagle. I watched with my 13-year-old son. So we're going back through the whole catalog I watched growing up. The one I will not touch is Old Yeller, because even just the thought of it, I bawl as a kid. I never watched it again, and still I get teary-eyed thinking about it. So I'm with you. Yeah.
Years ago, I wrote a film for Warner Brothers, an adaptation of Young Men and Fire, which is a Norman MacLean book. And it wasn't an adaptation of that book. It was a nightmare. They wanted to do something entirely different. It was a movie that was never made because the whole idea sucked. But one of the scenes I put in, it's, I was a firefighter for a number of years, and one of the ways the forest fires spread is burning animals. These poor things catch fire and they go running across the fire line, and that spreads the fire. It's terrible. It's real. And I put in that scene, and oh my God, the production people, no. And they said, you can kill as many firefighters in this thing as you want. You cannot, if you show an animal in jeopardy, you have to show him in another scene perfectly fine. And it's that serious a thing to put an animal in jeopardy.
Wow.
Or apparently it
Firefighters
has to be
don't
an
matter, by
animated
the way.
film by Walt Disney if you put an animal in jeopardy.
Exactly.
I mean, he
Bambi
got
and
away
Mom,
with it.
you're off. Yeah. Very good.
And I have to say that my writing partner wrote, when I told him when he sent that outline, we're not killing the dog, he said, well, in The Hound of the Baskervilles, they killed the dog. And, yeah, well, and it's still problematic.
There we go with Conan Doyle again, you know?
Didn't we kick him to the curb already?
Yeah, yeah. See, I think when you care, the thing to me, and I write across a number of genres in which I actually hate the term genre. I mean, I think, you know, I think To Kill a Mockingbird is one of the best thrillers I've ever read. But when you kill a character, you have to account for the effect that has, not just on the plot, you know, whether to move things forward, but like John was talking about, the effect it has on the characters around. And sometimes, you know, in both, I hate this, mainstream fiction and genre fiction, sometimes it all starts with a death, you know,
Mhm.
or a death is the pivotal moment. The last book I wrote, The Smoke in Our Eyes, essentially is completely triggered by a car wreck, killing one teenager and leaving the other to face law, order, and justice. And you know, the funny thing is, in the book, we never get to see the character who died, but we get to see the effect his death had on pretty much everyone in the town. So I think when you kill anybody or anything, you have to be aware of what would that happen in the real world scenario. What would the effect be? And that's one of the reasons John's example, I think, really drives the point home.
Absolutely. I mean, I certainly have no problem with killing characters in fiction. I mean, I love it when I love it when somebody, you know, I mean, this is filmed fiction, not, you know, written, but in, you know, like in a thriller movie, and so they take somebody off the board, like in a surprising way early on, and it makes you feel like, you know, everybody's at stake, everybody's vulnerable. That can really kind of heighten things. And so as a film watcher, as a novel reader, as a thriller fan, I love that trope. As a writer, I find that I kill fewer and fewer characters the older I get. And I think it's just because, I don't know if I'm getting old and soft. I don't know if it's like, you know, you know, parenting, you know, two kids into young adulthood. Or maybe it's the fact that I also write children's books. And I wish I could remember who said this, but there was a kids book author who said it really well one time. And they just said, you know, somebody was asking them, like, how do you handle death in kids books? And they said, if there's a simple equation, if death, then consequences. And, you know, you can kill characters in children's fiction. And Lord knows I've done it. And I and my co-author have also done it in kids books. But it's really, there has to be this ripple effect. And I love your example, Jim, of just sort of like, yeah, maybe you don't even need to know the person who died at the beginning, but a death can have a ripple effect on a community. You know, certainly, you know, in a kid's book, you know, I've got a new mystery series with, you know, a young sleuth who people start dropping dead in her building. And, you know, it's kind of fun and it's kind of a lark, but at the same time, you know, you can't treat it can't be too fun. What, you know, and partway through the book, we kill off the doorman, who is actually somebody she's very friendly with. And so that was kind of like the moment where things got very real. Instead of these kind of neighbors that she might have seen in the halls, and she kind of might have been aware of them, and it was kind of spooky and weird, but it was at arm's length. Suddenly it becomes very real and very scary, and the tone of the book changes at that moment.
Well,
I found it really interesting. A few years ago, I was a speaker at the Virginia Homicide Investigators Association annual meeting. And whew, that's an interesting crowd. Bunch of drinkers, really.
Tough room.
No, it's a great room, actually. There are a lot of really, really cool guys and ladies and gentlemen. And to a person, sit down there. It's like a bunch of writers. Some people go to bed early, but the cool kids close the bar. You talk to these folks, and to a person, they remember the names of every one of their cases after 20 years of doing this thing. Every single one of them every one of the cases has an impact on them, and they don't become numbers or caseloads. They have first and last names, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, I discovered that same thing with the Homicide Squad in Washington, D.C. in the months I spent with them, and then befriending a couple of them that really lasted decades. They would talk about that time, and sometimes they would forget to tell you that this was a victim in a homicide. They were real people to the homicide detectives, and that kind of restores your faith in the guys and the women who carry badges, but it also shows you the impact of letting death into your readers' eyes and hearts. I mean, that's really tricky and really important at the same time.
Well, and isn't that so interesting? Like the guys who really deal with death are so connected to it, and so connected to the victims. Whereas the crime fiction trope is always that like people become so hard boiled and thick skinned that they just that it just kind of bounces off of them or something like that.
Right. Or they have a quip, like someone dies and they're quick with a quip about it.
Or they're eating in the morgue, right? Like the most tired crime fiction trope there is. Like they're so jaded that like they're having a sandwich over the dead body, that kind of thing.
It depends what they're eating, but that's different. But yeah, I think and that's one of the reasons I think I have so few deaths in my books, because it really matters. It matters.
Sure.
I mean, that's why I started writing crime fiction to begin with, is that I wanted to write about something that mattered. And what matters more than the end of a life, which should not have ended then? Somebody ended it. And finding out what that was about, not necessarily getting justice, or maybe that death was justice, but finding out what it's about, I thought was something worth writing about and worth asking readers to spend time reading about.
Right.
But there's a whole another side of the mystery genre, the Jessica Fletcher side, where the dead body is just kind of a trigger for often there's not a lot of tears shed over who died at the latest tea party. It's the journey to find out who killed it, but nobody. The fact of the dead body is just the point of the story. It's not necessarily the background of that body. So I don't think not all of the for new writers who are watching this, I don't think there always has to be this karmic burden, dark burden that is put on the writers. And I will say in a number of my books, there are, I'm borrowing from a friend of mine, Revis Wortham, that some folks just need killing. There's that element of the fiction world too.
Name some.
Sorry. Yeah, right.
Well, Hannibal Lecter springs to mind, but
Sure.
In those books or TV shows and such, the person in that closed system, one body, 5 to 6 suspects, the person who's killed is the person who deserves killing, who needs killing, and everybody has a reason to kill him.
Good point.
Those are never, the innocent young niece who came to town and ended up dead. It's always somebody that lots of people. And the thing about Agatha Christie is that she's sort of one of the founders of that genre. But in her case, the motives were darker than they look from the outside. It didn't have much to do with the family inheritance and that kind of thing, the way it looks at the beginning like it does. So it's a little more than just the trigger for the journey. And, you know, someone like Jessica Fletcher was very interested in, I mean, that's the old, you know, order, chaos, order thing.
Mhm.
Very interested in reestablishing Cabot Cove, or wherever she happened to be and found a body, as a place where order existed.
How do you handle it from a technical perspective? And I know there's probably multiple ways, but
there's, I early on in my career made a decision that I did not want to provide. I was writing about a bomb, and I realized I didn't want to provide somebody with a blueprint on how to build a bomb that would work. And I remember I put something. It was a car bomb, and I did something that was, quote, vital, that if you did it, basically you just end up with oil all over your face. I mean, so when I want to talk about, for the most part, every time I kill somebody, it's with a method that would work. You know, I mean, I think all of us on the panel have spent time with people who have, or have at least the ability to do that, veterans and other individuals. And you want to make it so that they believe it. You know, I don't want, you know, one of my former special forces friends to say, that's not how you would do it. You know, I mean, it's and I got in trouble for this. I taught my son when he was in grade school. Oh, I got so much in trouble. I taught him the proper way to carrot.
Go on.
And he showed it to his class in kind of a show and tell moment. And I got called to the school. But, you know, it was, you know, those things happen for those of us who are writers.
And you said, am I wrong? Am I wrong?
Oh, sorry, I went off on a tangent there, you know.
It's okay. No worries. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
People tend to get, you know, shot or stabbed or pushed off buildings. There's nothing fancy about the death. Once I used poison, but I researched poisons and they are so horrifying in their effects. I mean, they all work, but they cause so much pain and I couldn't stand it. The only one I could stand was oleander because it interferes with the heart and then the heart stops. I thought, okay, that I can deal with, but not the ones that melt your insides and stuff.
Yeah.
But generally, the fancy ways of killing people, or the ones that, you know, you get shot, but that's because you crossed, you know, the tripwire that was attached to the you know,
the bowling ball that knocked over the dominoes and
right. I don't have. If you're doing that, there has to be a reason for that. And your killer has to have done that for some really clever or outrageous or whatever reason. And I don't have that. You know, that is not my interest.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, same. Like when I was younger, I wrote a scene I really enjoyed where a guy kills somebody with a log at a campground, and I thought it was like hilarious and effective. But since then, I've become too squeamish. My preferred form of death is off stage.
Well, and that's kind of what I was asking too. Is there's the describing it to, and like maybe horror, you would see more like the gory detail of it, or killing off stage, or just kind of being very blunt, or right. There's the how do you go about it as a writer, to cover death. And I'm sure there's 100 different ways, and it depends on the situation, right? Like not just genres, the tone maybe of the story you're writing and things as well. But did you start to say something, John?
Yeah, well, two things actually. I want to go back one. Have y'all met Lucy Zare? Yeah, she's a pharmacist who's turned to the dark side. Actually, she's brilliant, and she does seminars on poisons, and she's got all these old poisons and stuff. Actually, I think Zahray, I think. And she's got a website. So if you need to know anything about how to poison people, she's the place to go to, and she's a delight to talk to. But anyway, so as far as the technical,
I should say, Writers Drinking Whiskey does not promote, anyone's use to poison the stuff.
But for research, Lucy is really good at what she does. But in terms of the technicality of stuff, and again, it gets to my corner of the genre. Usually, people are going to be shot or stabbed, and so the gunmanship comes into play, and gun handling skills come into play. There's never these things where people draw a gun and then cock it before they shoot it. That would never happen. Why are you going into a scary situation with a gun that's not cocked yet? And for me and for my readers, if I get a detail like that wrong, my life is hell. So, it's really important for me to get those details wrong. And if I omit the details, my life is hell. So you have to know your readership and what you're walking into. And this is kind of my sleeve of expertise and fun anyway. So that's not a big deal. About 20 years ago, I was writing Scott Free, which was, I don't know, my fourth, fifth book. And I was writing from the point of view of an assassin, and he had to make this. I decided I wanted to go into Steve Hunter land. So I was going to do all the technical details of a long shot. And I didn't. I was way over my head. So I called a friend of mine who's really good with guns, and this was over his head. And he said, I know a guy who can answer the question. I said, okay, what's his name? And he said, no. Let me call him first, and then I'll call you back and arrange a phone call. So about 10 minutes later, John called me back and says, okay, you can call him, but call him in the next 20 minutes. So I call this guy, and he answers the phone like 2347, whatever the last four numbers of his phone number was. And I said, hi, I'm John Gilson. I know who you are. What's the shot you need to take? So I start talking about this, and he goes into the weather conditions and the humidity and all that. And I'm thinking more in the nature of the questions that I'm asking. I said, this is fiction, right? He said, they're always fiction. Holy shit. Who is this guy?
Yeah. It's like, what's your cover story?
Oh, that's great.
And at the end of the phone call, I said, I presume you don't want to be in the acknowledgments. And he said, that would really be bad. I said, okay. I took all of that out. It's nowhere in the scene.
Oh, that is fantastic. So actually, I'm going to go into the woo-woo, John. So you know me from talking before, so I like my woo-woo. But I had on Eric LaSalle, who's an author, but also known for his acting and
emergency
producing.
Room doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he had had a quote that he had characters fight to stay alive, right? Not in the fiction, but to him, right? Like, so as he's writing, like the character's screaming at him to stay alive. Have you guys ever felt anything like that? Am I just being woo-woo with Eric on this? Or
I think if you're not feeling what your character's feeling, you're already in trouble. And whether or not the character is going to die, the plot and the rest of the story, they're in peril. I mean, you have to put the character has to emerge within you, and you have to share these emotions. And sometimes I find myself like, moving as my character is supposed to be moving. I I don't think there's anything woo-woo about it. I think that's one of the things that separates the good writers like those four from, I don't want to say bad writers, average writers, is, they have an affinity with their characters, and they have a ability to project how those characters are not only completing whatever they have to do on that page, but how they're feeling when they're doing it. It's like, he bumped his elbow as he brought his hand back to slap her. I mean, it's like something, those kinds of things, you have to feel them, because if you don't feel them, the reader's not gonna.
Yeah,
I'll go with Jim's answer.
No, I totally agree. I don't know what fight to stay alive actually means. Like to stay in the book. Like if they're not fighting hard enough.
I think that's what he meant. Yeah.
Right out of the book. Yeah. Anybody who is not fully human, three-dimensional, alive in the book does not belong there. And there are lots of different ways that writers have expressed that. Michael Connelly's famous "every character wants something on every page," and if he doesn't want something on that page, he shouldn't be on that page. That it's the same kind of thing. The character is not in the book for your convenience. You are in the chair for the character's convenience. I tell my writing students all the time. Some of them look at me blankly, and some of them know exactly.
Well, what I love about this show is, if selfishly, it's like I've gotten master classes, like I get to do like 2-3 master classes a month now. I talk with all these brilliant people and have you tell me things, and I'm like, man, this is, if I could ever condense this into something lasered down, this would be brilliant. But you want to take it from there, John?
Yeah, I grew up in the 70s, and all the movies of the 70s, you have that really senselessly ironic twist to everything. And every now and then I'll be writing, and that emerges. It's sort of it doesn't say the end, it says the beginning. That kind of that really corny kind of twist. And not too long ago, I killed off a character strictly for that ironic life kind of sucks sometimes sense. And I actually this never happens. Obviously, I wasn't all that tired. I actually got up and changed the manuscript because I realized that was just wrong. It wasn't wrong to the character necessarily, but it was wrong to the story. And it was bad. It was bad reader service. And if it's bad reader service, then it just doesn't belong there. There are a number of characters, and again, I go to the word utility. To me, they're the walk-ons, the characters who help to propel the story. They've got to have a backstory. They got to have a full arc. Otherwise, you're cheating the reader. But I never intend for them to live on. My very second book, At All Costs, back in 1996, I guess, I had an FBI agent who was the foil against the good guy, Irene Rivers. She had no future in any of the books. She did her thing and was gone. And then when I started the Grave books, I needed an FBI director. I thought, oh, cool. It's been enough years. She killed off her former boss at the end of At All Costs. So I made Irene Rivers the FBI director for 15 books. And she kind of became kind of a cool character. And now I'm writing what is the first book of what's going to be the Irene Rivers series, off of a character I never thought would ever be, even a recurring character. So I think sometimes characters don't develop. It's not like they knock on your door. And I don't believe in that part of the woo-woo, that characters don't come and visit me and they don't force me to do stuff. But I think sometimes a character is just a kernel of an idea that can carry a lot more story than I thought they originally could. And then, it's okay. Let's keep milking this. They're good. They're fun, and I enjoy developing stories through them.
Right. Well, and you see that in film and TV quite a bit, right? Like especially TV, you'll see there'd be a side character, and then they're like, "Oh, we can do more with her," and you'll see interviews, and they'll keep bringing them back, and then Joni and Chachi will have their own series, coming from it.
Really?
That did well.
That's the example you're going to use.
How about Better Call Saul?
Better Call, yeah, very good. Yeah, that's a more current example. This is why you have the podcast where you talk movies, which is excellent, by the way, and I'll link it up. I listened to the first episode yesterday. You and Mike are really fun on that.
Chachi.
I think it lasted a full season. Yeah, maybe. Round 2. The question is, so how do you write in a tradition? And actually, Jim, I love that you mentioned earlier not liking the word genre. That's actually why when I was writing that question out, I used tradition, and then put parentheses. We all understand what genres kind of are. I just think they're more ideas than something concrete. But so I am talking like just kind of traditions. There's also the hero journey. There's certain traditions of different genres. How do you write in those traditions? And still make your work stand out. And then, and John, part of the reason I had this was thinking about like your series too. You've done a lot of Jonathan Graves books and things. So how do you make the next one be something that still honors what you've done, that still meets the tradition of Jonathan Graves coming in, but then still stands on its own and kind of stands out, for your readers. So maybe I think we had started. So I don't think we started with you yet. Kiri, you want to take us?
Sure, although I'm probably the least qualified to answer this question. But yeah, I also dislike the use of the word, genres, and literary fiction is one of my least favorite phrases of all time.
Sure.
Getaways is a lot of good writing. But tradition is a good word, because we do understand that, certainly in the mystery world, there are traditions of mystery writing. And, I write a lot of different things. I just had my 13th book come out, and I, have yet to have a second book, in a series. That one will be out next year, but like, I tend to do a lot of different things. I'm pretty restless. But I think I can say how not to write in a tradition. My very first book many years ago, I was a young idiot and had this kind of grand idea for a book. So, I had read a fair amount of crime fiction. And as I said, I wasn't, really attracted to the kind of, sleuthy, clue-based kind of stuff. I was attracted to crime stuff. And, but I was, in my 20s and very grandiose when I started this thing. And, I had this idea, like, I think a lot of bad first novels are by young men who want to like make a statement, like they're some of these young men write a 1,000-page novel with footnotes, or some of them, some of them say like, I'm going to bust this thing wide open. And, I had this idea for my first book, which was going to be a mystery, but I had this idea that it was going to be some weird amalgamation of The Unforgiven, which is like a great classic film that kind of an ultimate statement on the Western genre, but like inverted a lot of the tropes of the Western genre. And then I also was a big fan of David Lynch, and I kind of thought I wanted to do something that kind of melded these two concepts together. And I came up with this idea for a mystery with, I think the original idea for my hero was not bad. I wanted to write about a hard drinking crime solver whose drinking actually was really interfered with his ability to solve the crime, because I had read enough mysteries to know like, this is just kind of tired. People drink really hard, and then 2 minutes later they're out like, shooting accurately out of a moving vehicle. So I wanted the drinking to be an impediment. But my big bad idea was like, thought, why do people always solve the mystery in these things? So I think I'm going to write one where he just doesn't ever figure it out.
Right.
So at any rate, that book did get published, but thankfully under a pseudonym. So, and I think that, I think the answer to sum up that kind of long-winded answer is just that, I now speak a lot about writing and on a lot of panels, go to a lot of conferences. And what I always tell aspiring authors is that to be an author, you must be a reader. There's no shortcut. You must be a reader. All the best writers I know are the best readers. They're the people who are always reading. They're enthusiastic promoters of other people's works. But that is how you understand writing. That is how you understand a tradition. So you can't just be, some guy with an idea for a book who's like, I'm gonna make a statement on this tradition, when I'm still just barely dipping my toes into it. I didn't know enough about it to make that statement. It's a book that maybe I could have written effectively 20 years later.
Sure.
There was a book that got a little bit of a splash last year, and I won't say what it was because I hated it. And it did exactly that. It followed this guy, and in the end, you don't know. He did figure out what was going on, but you don't know if at the end the one further crime was ever committed. He turns and walks away at a point where there is a possibility of somebody killing somebody, and you don't know whether it ever happened.
Was this a work in translation?
No, this was
Okay. I'm thinking of a different book.
Oh, you mean it happened more than once? It annoyed the hell out of me. The whole book annoyed the hell out of me.
It's a new trope now. Everyone's doing it.
Yeah. No, the whole
Yeah,
thing.
it's extremely frustrating to the reader.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Why have I followed this guy for this whole book when he has basically found nothing? The bad guy came back to him and said, "Yo, by the way, it was me," and then went out and maybe killed someone else or maybe didn't. Why was I here? Why? What did my presence add to this book? I just finished another one where the end is left hanging. It's not a crime novel, though, really. Percival Everett, The Trees. I assume you all have already read this book. One of the best books I ever read. And the last line is a question, and it's not answered. And I've been thinking about that for, days and days and days. So it's not that all the answers have to be found, but you can't just have your character wander around and then wander off, which is what this book I did.
Sure, sure. Well, what it made me think of is that it just the way your guys' statements combined there is that there's especially when you're young, there's a bit of ego and you're pursuing of the ego. And now I want to write this and I'm going to pull the rug out from all of those silly readers versus.
Because I know, yeah.
Right, because I know. And then that's what's best for them, because I know at 19, what's best for the world. Versus, it's a pact with your reader and you've kind of left the reader out. So so as a reader, you're like, well, why did I come along with this?
Right, now this was not a young writer, but it was a first novel. So I guess it amounts to the same thing. I sort of miss being 19 and knowing what was right for the world. But I can no longer pretend that I do. I can only now ask the questions. And in the course of asking the questions in the course of a book, I have to supply the answers to the ones that are part of the narrative, who did what and with to whom. But those aren't the big questions. The big questions are, how did the world get into this situation where all these things happen? And that's what I want my reader to think about. But I want to give them, the puzzle answers at the same time.
And adding to that, SJ, if you can give your readers a sense of the questions from the novel that are appearing in the reader's own life that they have to answer, they'll feel a kinship with your book, with your work, with what you were trying to do that is incredibly rewarding. And a rewarded reader, becomes they come back, and we all want that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and why do it if you're not forming an actual connection with someone, some other human out there, like through your words, through the book? Like, it can be entertainment, but the entertaining can still be a connection, right? There's still something there. So why write something that's not for someone, right? So
it can also be said though that we writers are not always the best with people. So maybe sometimes there's just a Short-sightedness there.
Yeah,
We
this
try.
whole concept of genre came late to me. I wrote my first book in 1994. Well, the first book that sold, Nathan's Run, in 1994. Sold it in 95, came out in 96. And, there was no internet. There was no, and I did this. What is this genre word? I had no idea that I was writing in a genre. And after it was done, I think it was stocked as mystery. No, I guess it went right as thriller. And I didn't understand, what a genre was. And it turns out to be that it's a marketing trope. It's they have to know what shelf, back when there were things called bookstores, what shelf to put it on. And okay, I get it that, you have to, the box of books comes in and you have to know what part of the store to put it in. So do you put it in the mysteries? You put it in the thrillers? Do you put it at the front of the store? You put it at the back of the store? You put it on an end cap? No, those are paid for. So it goes. So, I think that it's a kiss of death for writers as they're writing to think too much about so-called genre rules. But I think it's also a kiss of death to completely ignore them. I think you need to be aware, certainly as a early in your career writer. No, I won't even go there. I am very aware that as one who's got a pretty well-established career, that I'm kind of a factory worker, and I don't mean that in a self-derogatory way at all. But I know that, I owe a book. It happened coming up on July 15th. And there's a lot of stuff that is keyed off of that. There's a whole editorial and production thing and marketing thing, and all of that gets teed off of that deadline. And if I were to turn in, they're expecting to have this Irene Rivers thriller. And if it turns into be an Irene Rivers romance, wow, that throws everything off, and it screws up a lot of stuff, and people have wasted a lot of time and money on that. So, it is important because it is a business, and I have responsibilities because I signed a contract. I have responsibilities to support the business, right? So, I think you got to write the story that's in you. My storytelling. My natural storytelling skills have always gone toward thriller. I don't write mysteries. I think mysteries are hard to write. I mean, the whole business of planting clues and all of that, it's really hard.
I'm sorry, John, I have to interrupt. I was just about to say, my skills don't go anywhere near thriller, and I have no idea how to do that. And it's so funny that you think that what I do is hard, and I'm thinking, how does John actually do that?
It's the wiring, right? Everybody is so much different, and what really makes the difference, I think, and what everybody on my screen here shares, is that somewhere along the line, everybody got comfortable with their narrative voice. Their ability, you put stuff on the page, and maybe the first time down, that's not quite right. And then finally you massage it to the point that now it not only does it say what I want it to say, but it sounds like I want it to sound.
Right.
And that's the maturation process as a writer. And I think it's the hardest thing for a writer to get to. And there's a different voice to the hard-boiled detective novel than it is for a thriller, than it is for a cozy, telling the same story, having the same events.
Right.
Now you tell me.
Never too late. Never too late.
This is why I'm here too. I'm here to learn.
Very good. I wonder how you guys feel, because one of the things that's gotten very popular, I think it probably started with Game of Thrones when it blew up on television, and I think it's gotten a little bit dreaded now, is the subverting expectations, right? The subverting tropes or twisting tropes. I mean, some of it can be very good. Sometimes it can pull the rug out from under people. Where do you guys kind of stand on that? Like, how do you, maybe I can ask it this way, how do you subvert expectations without making the reader feel like you broke that pact?
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I sort of have a sense of what you're saying, Bill, but
Sure.
I'm not there to subvert the reader's expectations. I'm to lead the reader's expectations through the story and to the story that I'm trying to tell. I think there are a lot of critical concepts that I read about in the New York Times or, Lit Hub or somewhere that to me just feel like the second-rate English teacher in the high school down the street. I write for I don't want to say regular. I used to tell my people when I give a speech that I write for someone in Nebraska. And the reason I said Nebraska was because that's one of the few states I've not been in more than a couple times. And it just, you want to be honest with that person even when you're deceiving them. So I don't want to subvert their expectations. I want to exceed their expectations. And if that means I got to write, oh God, a James Joyce chapter with not a single period anywhere visible in it, yes, don't.
Well, so maybe I can. I'll give an example from Game of Thrones because it got George R.R. Martin wrote the books that the show was based on,
right?
And I've heard him talk about it, and people can find him easily, anyways. But what he kind of reacted to in the fantasy genre, to throw the genre on it, was that it's like, oh, these people have a quest and they go out and they do a bunch of dangerous things and they go home and they're all safe. And so he was like, no, there should be consequences. If you betray the king, one of those consequences is maybe you die, right? So the first season of Game of Thrones, and spoiler alert if no one's watched it and is intending at this late stage, the real spoiler is the last season. So
everybody dies.
But it starts off and you think the noble hero is Ned Stark. He's going to be the noble hero. You're going to follow along through the series. And it's like episode 8, they kill him off. And it makes sense for the story. And it's very well done. It got popular for a reason early on. It does go a little off rails and the books have never been finished. But so they started using that term for that. The subverting expectation is the expectation for the genre was noble hero goes out and slays dragon, whatever it might be. And in this case, noble hero was too noble in a world that didn't reward that nobility, and he ends up getting killed off. And so when that happened, it kind of propelled that show. It was one of the things that propelled it to such heights, was that people were like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. And when people would do things, you knew there was consequences to it. But later on, then when they kind of got behind the books and things, then it kind of started to become, no, I'm going to kill this person off just because people aren't expecting it.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily consequence. I'm just going to do something that I'm going to subvert your expectations just to subvert them. Versus it.
That feels like it's just like people just trying to insert more incident in order to keep your attention, which feels like that is not always coming from story. Logical outcomes of storytelling. It feels like we've got to have something radical that people can talk about around the water cooler or something.
Right. On the TikTok.
Yeah. I mean, sorry I butted in there. I think my answer to that sort of question is just sort of like, I'm also an editor, and I see a lot of manuscripts that I'm constantly just giving a simple piece of advice, is just like, whether it's phrasing or whether it's a small incident in a chapter, If you feel like you've seen it before, if you feel like you know where it's going, you've got to freshen it up. I mean, people rely, particularly in mystery and crime fiction, a lot of aspiring authors will just rely on like cliche phrasing because it's just kind of like it's comfortable. It feels like idioms that they know and understand. But a lot of times, if you just tinker with it and you just you turn it inside out, or give us a surprising ending to what seems like a familiar idiom, like suddenly it becomes fresh, and suddenly I'm interested, and I think, oh, this character has an interesting way of speaking. And so, I mean, my answer to that is just very simple, which is just that, if the expectation, if by following the reader's expectation, it's going to end in a predictable way, then you probably do need to subvert it a little bit,
Sure.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on here. What you're talking about, Bill, is story. I think what I set out to do deliberately when I created Lydia Chin is do that in character, because the Chinese woman, except for Juanita Sheridan's Lily Wu, which books are coming back out, by the way, but she tended to be, a dragon lady, or a Kill Bill type. I mean, there were not regular, ordinary
Or a
Chinese.
concubine,
Or a
yeah.
concubine, right. And Lydia is just, a Chinese American girl who was born here, grew up in New York, and is a private eye. And she doesn't have an accent. And while she can do martial arts, she's not, she can't take out a gang of 15 bad guys. So in character, I do try to do that. I
Sure.
every time I can. But in story, the story grows out of the characters, and the characters will do what they do, and you will follow them and tell the story. And to kill off somebody, or have somebody come back when you thought they were dead, or have a zombie come back because they really were dead, or something like that, does not do it for me. The other time I did that, these are in my books that nobody knows about, but I did 2 paranormals under another name, and those vampires were highly educated, because when you live forever, you have plenty of time to study, and you have plenty of money because you invested, 500 years.
Correct.
And so these were just, highly educated, kind of regular people. They weren't nasty, and and like Charlene Harris says, they got their blood without biting people in the neck, in this case from Catholic hospitals. But they have a lot, but that's a different deal. But I think in character, because it's so easy to fall into character tropes, the retired colonel, and the hard-bitten cop who eats in the morgue, and that kind of thing. So if you can subvert it in character, the story will take on the life of actual people, and then the story will be what it is. It won't be a cardboard chess game.
Right. Yeah.
Jonathan Grace from Jonathan here. He's a perfect example of that. If he wasn't who he was, he wouldn't be in the book. And as a consequence of that, the book can be about anything. I mean, I'm waiting for Mr. Gilstrap to have something with Space Force. I don't know, but we trust that Jonathan Graves is who we've known him to be.
Yes.
And that allows, that allows him to do anything, including show up at a Kmart when, a crazed mass shooting happens. You can use that, by the way,
Well, thank you for that. And that's, it's interesting when you talk about tropes and genres and writerly things. Those things don't really enter my mind much. Never, actually, in a conscious way. you always try to avoid the cliches. And when you've seen it a dozen times, you say that, okay, I don't want to do that again. But in reality, there's only so many ways that you can enter a room. There's only so many ways that you can engage in a firefight. There's only so many ways you can do the action scenes and stay within the sleeve of reality. But no, in terms of the character, certainly in Jonathan Grave, he's got his moral code. There are things you do and you don't do, and he's mission first. He takes this on. He's going to rescue these guys, and they're coming home, or Jonathan's dying in the process. That's the deal, and everything else is secondary to that, including the bad guys. It sucks to be a bad guy when Jonathan and his team are coming in. The Constitution is second to Jonathan's mission when he goes in. So he's a murderer. He goes in, and if he doesn't get warrants, he doesn't do. He listens to people you're not supposed to listen to. He does all kinds of extra legal stuff, and he's forgiven by the reader because he's kind of the one we'd like to have. If it's my kid that's been kidnapped, that's who I want to have doing it, right? So it's a moral mission, and he does it ethically. He'll say he's on the side of the angels. He's not an assassin. He leaves a lot of dead bodies behind, but he's not an assassin. So, it's a matter of, it's a balancing act. And there's a promise I make. It's not, it's not a verbal promise, but it's a subtle promise. It's developed over 15 books that I hope the readers have come to realize that they're going to get a certain ride. It's not going to be the same ride over and over again. It's not. Some are more emotional than others. Some have a bigger karmic cost. But we know, it's a series that Jonathan's going to survive, right? Because I got to pay my mortgage, and and the good guys are going to win, because
Sure.
This is the moment. That's why I think why people read my kind of thrillers is because, for this slice of time, no matter what all the other crap that's going on in the world, for this slice of time, the good guys are going to win. So. But one note I want to make on genre. I did a signing 2 weeks ago in Martinsburg, West Virginia, and I was so dwarfed by it was with another author that I'd never heard of, which is fine. I was told she wrote romance. There were hundreds of people that showed up for her. Jennifer L. Armentrout, who writes young adult, paranormal, sci-fi romance. That's a genre.
Right.
So, and I think, okay, I'm just a dinosaur. I didn't even know. But God bless her. She best-selling author. She's lovely. She's really just a delightful lady who sold a shit ton of books.
Sure. It's the Amazon part of it too now, is you'll realize, because there's virtual bookshelves and there's so many different categories that it can go down. So I can see that. I'm sorry, SJ, what did you want to add?
I was going to say, if she's writing young adult, God bless her, because those people grow up,
Right.
and maybe they don't want to read science fiction, fantasy, space travel. I learned, I was just at Left Coast, and I learned about romantasy, in which apparently there are dragons and great sex. It's not the dragons that are having the great sex; it's the people. But that's
there's a lot of fantasy where there's some weird creatures having sex too. It's getting weird out there. There's whole parallel universes of authorship that.
But I got lost.
I'm only dimly aware of.
I don't know if it was Charlene's series that there was that vampire time where the vampires who are dead got together and had a baby. And as an engineer in my past life, it's like my head exploded a little bit and I just couldn't say, okay, I'm done. I can't do this.
Yeah. Well, I remember my daughter's reading Twilight or something. And, oh yeah, Edward's 300 years old. I'm like, and she's 16? Yeah, but he's No. This is very weird. Like, why is the 300-year-old dating the 16-year-old? Like, this makes no sense.
But he's also 16.
Right. Yeah, that's it. It blows my mind. But
in circumstances it's not worth sharing. I recently saw the movie Twilight for the first time, and it was fascinating because I thought it is, truly a horror story, because to be trapped in high school at the same age for all eternity. I mean, I was horrified, but not for the reason anybody intended.
Amen. Final round here. So why do writers fail to meet their goals, right? Their ambitions. And what can they do to overcome those? So maybe, Jen, we can start with you.
With me?
Yes.
Oh, I think part of the reason might be that they aren't quite clear what their goals are. I mean, if you're starting to be a writer, I mean, we use quotes there, and your goal is to be on Good Morning America, and if you're a man with a beautiful actress, a blonde actress who's going to swoon and take you back to the penthouse, that's crazy.
That's very specific, Jim.
Well,
He's had a lot of time to think about it.
I mean, it's like I've heard a couple authors occasionally express goals that, didn't seem, it wasn't that they weren't necessarily realistic. It was that they didn't have to do with creating good fiction. I mean, that's what you should be approaching this thing you're calling your novel with. You want to make good fiction that other people will read and find something in it worthwhile to justify their 6 hours spent on reading your book. And if you're not meeting your goals, part of that is just because sometimes life sucks. I mean, I used to say that there's somewhere in one of the neighborhoods in DC that's not particularly plugged in, there's a wonderful woman author pounding out things on her computer that you can't get out to any agent or publisher and get read. And that's a travesty, but it happens. And that maybe, that's going to be you, but you got to just keep that goal of creating a good book in your mind. And if you're stumbling over, who's going to pay for the book tour, when you don't even have the book finished, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong.
It's hard to go on Carson when you don't even have the book.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping all the references very current today too. Johnny Gloves, Chauncey, and Carson. Like I'm going old school with every reference today.
It's hard to go on Carson these days anyway.
I love recording Zooms in the past. It's my favorite thing.
Yeah, I would completely agree with Jim. I'm not sure what you mean by meeting your goals. I often fail to meet my word count for the day or my chapter. I'm going to finish this chapter and it gets to be 5 hours later and I still haven't figured out where the third guy is. I mean, that in that sense, meeting your goals is a real pain. It's like, I mean, this whole book writing thing, it's like running a marathon and every day you're training. And you're training and you're training and you sprain your ankle and it's raining and you can only go, 10 miles today and we're going to go 15 and so on. It's never easy. But writers who fail to meet their goal of actually finishing a book, of finishing a book that they like, which is not the same as finishing the book you meant to write when you started. Because I have actually never done that. Writers, I'm completely with Jim. It depends what your goals are. If your goals are, I'm gonna, like Kier was saying before, I'm gonna write a book that completely, you know, explains everything for the whole world.
Changes literature.
Forever.
Yeah, forever. Right.
Correct.
Or, I'm gonna write a book that's gonna, get me to the penthouse. Those are not goals related to the book. And the
Sure.
book is the only thing that you can control, and it's the only thing that comes out of you. So I'm not sure which writers you're talking about, but if you're talking about actual hardworking writers at the beginnings of their careers, I would say give yourself a break if you don't meet your daily goal or whatever. But you have to sit in the chair and write. That's the only way
Exactly.
the book gets written.
Yeah.
It's-
Amen. Well, and I think because like you guys are all super experienced writers that have had great success, right? So you guys know how to like to set a goal and to like to meet it or to not, so like you were just saying, sometimes you don't meet your daily goals, right? But you go on. John, you mentioned, hey, you have July 15th or whatever deadline, right? So you have to have a book by that date, and that's a goal. So I'm thinking more for people starting out that don't have that. It feels more mysterious to them.
Can we just quote the author of our group who couldn't make it here, Steve Hunter? And every time I love being on a panel with him, because at a certain point he says, do you want to know how to write a book? He says, it's a 6-word answer on how to write a book. The audience just grabs themselves, Start now, work every day, finish. I don't know if that completely addresses what we were talking about, but I wanted to give Steve Hunter
I think there's a
brilliant way to do it.
I think there's an emotional element to this too. And I will speak for everybody here on the screen because I think I can do that. I call it page 200 syndrome, which is actually happening for me now around page 100. In this case, I have an important character. She needs to be introduced at the beginning of the story, and then she plays a really big role at the end of the story. I have nothing for her to do at like the 100-page mark. I can't just have her disappear. And that's kind of where I'm stuck. And so I can stew over that, or I can move on and write the rest of the story and just have confidence that that's going to work itself out, because it always does. The second act dilemma where we've all got to the point somewhere our talent has evaporated. This is the worst piece of crap we've ever written. Every other idea we've ever had and the one we're going to have tomorrow is far better than the one that I'm committed to now. But somehow, you got to wrangle that all together and say, no, this is the one I'm committed to, and I'm going to follow this through. And then somehow around page 300, it works out, because it always does. And then somehow you make the deadline, because you always do. And unfortunately, new writers don't have the deadline, and they don't have the experience, and they don't have the support group to say, well, yeah, that's how it's supposed to work. Yes, am I right? Am I speaking for everyone
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're absolutely right, John.
The one thing I've learned, I just published my 19th book, and the one thing I have learned is what John just said. It does happen. It doesn't get easier.
No.
It never gets easier. You never figure it out and say, oh, now I know how to do this. It never gets easier. But the thing you do learn is that it's possible, because it has happened every other time. The one book I was about to abandon, one of my early books, because I was so confused and so screwed up. And I thought, God didn't say I had to write this book. I have a better idea, like John said, a better idea. And this little voice in the back of my head said, if you give up this book, you will never finish a book, because you were in this position on the last book, and you will be in this position on the next book. And if you give up from this position, it's all over. And I thought, okay, if that's what the little voice says, because that little voice doesn't speak up very much. And I thought, okay, I will finish this goddamn book. And even if it will get to the end, there will be a complete story. So, that may be what we want to tell the beginning writers out there, is that if it's hard, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. That means you're doing it. And you'll stay hard, and you will learn that you can get to the end. And then you'll be in the same position we are.
And that lie you're telling yourself that once I do this, I'll get to the second book and I know what I'm doing, it'll be easier.
No. You will get to the second book. That's enough. That's all you're going to get, is the chance to write the second
But
book.
surely Grisham, who's written 30 books, it's easy for him now.
Any aspiring authors who are listening, I mean, this is all just gold, and write this down, rewind this and listen again. I mean, this is gold from like people who know. I would just add that, like, I like Jim's point about understanding your goal is really important. I've always said to people, like, a lot of writers feel like aspiring authors, or even like authors early in their career, feel like they're this failure because they had this inchoate goal, this idea of what a writer would be, being a writer would be. And of course, it always involves a limousine and, awards and all this stuff. And like, ha, 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 joke's on you. But like, it does really help to, first of all, immerse yourself in the writing ecosystem enough. Go to readings, listen to panels, watch YouTubes of writers drinking whiskey and talking about this stuff, so that you just kind of have some benchmarks and something to understand what is a realistic goal. And for me, my realistic goal was I wanted to write and publish one book. I just thought, if I can publish a book, then I'm a published author and I haven't failed. I did it. And you can always revise your goal. So after I'd published that one book, I thought, well, I sure want to do another one. Wouldn't that be great? And a few years ago, my buddy Frank Sennett and I were sitting around and drinking. We said, how about like 25 books? That'd be a nice shelf, So you can revise your goals. But my goal wasn't to win an award, and it wasn't to get a 6-figure advance. It was to write and publish a book. And for that first book under the pseudonym, and the book I was talking about earlier, I received an advance in the high 3 figures. But I did publish that book. But secondly, I would say that to reach the goal, to finish the book, it's just so vitally important to just enjoy writing. I mean, if you do not enjoy the process of sitting, I mean, it sounds like, easy advice to give, but like, honestly, if you don't like it, you're not going to reach the goals. Like, if you're writing books to become well-known or wealthy, like, again, joke's on you. There are a lot of easier ways to do that. Mm-hmm. But, I always say that, I can prove that I would write books even if they weren't paying me to do it, because I did that for many years before they started paying me to do it. And I know I will continue to do it if they stop paying me to do it, because that is an enjoyable activity to me. It's the thing that helps me make sense of the world, and it's how I most want to spend my time.
And I'd like to add to that, Keir, there's a very famous woman author whose name I don't want to misquote, but she said, I hate writing, but I love having written. And I thought, what a terrible stupid way to live your life. It's like, come on, it's like, I think it might have been, could have been Dorothy Parker or someone.
I think it was Dorothy Parker.
But it was like, the moment I heard that, I never read anything else by Dorothy Parker, because what a horrible life, she was being a fraud to herself. Take up, I don't know. There are factories that could use workers in America, just.
But we're so glad for all the aphorisms.
Yeah. Every one of us here loves what we do. We love the writing. My comment is that for me, writing is like a cross between sex and a heroin addiction. I've never done heroin, but I have an imagination, and it's just, I love it. I mean, and like all the others here, I am so lucky that moment when you get rewarded by actually holding this thing that started up as a whiff of a notion in your ambition to be a writer.
Mhm.
That's great, but you got to do the next one now. It's
Yeah, yeah. Amen. Well, what's funny is that working a corporate career that I just got informed runs out at the end of June. So maybe no longer working a corporate career. But one of the things you learn early on is about goal setting. And so there's so many different ways. One, and people can look it up if they want, they call it SMART. It's an acronym, but it's having realistic goals. But the A in SMART means attainable. So it means my goal is to set off, and I think you guys have really nailed it, is that what's attainable for you is to write the product. That does, like, it's not attainable for you to get the 6-figure advance, to get the, the blonde bombshell or what, right? That might happen downstream, but that is not something that's actually attainable.
I've been married for
with the
41
task you're
years to
doing.
a brunette, so I think it's counterproductive to go for the blonde bombshell. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but no, I think
Anyway.
Bill, you're absolutely right. The thing you can control is your time spent writing the best book you can write. What happens to it and you after that, you can't control. And the
Right.
industry is the industry, and you might get the 6-figure advance. Some people do, why wouldn't it be you? But you can't control that. All you can do is sit at the desk, which is lonely, and you get a backache, and you
Yeah.
turn out your pages every day, and eventually you finish the book. That's all that's in
Mhm.
your control. But you know what? It's enough. Like
Absolutely.
Tim says, I am so lucky to have this career, to be
Mhm.
able to sit at the desk every day and worry about my deadline and throw papers in the air and stuff like that.
Right.
Feel,
Very good.
this is what I wanted since I was a kid, and I'm doing it, and I'm just so fortunate. I would say I'm blessed, but I'm people say that too much. So, but
Well,
You have to do the hashtag
but-
if you do. I
but-
hear hashtag blessed is super
Yes.
awesome now.
The other side of that is, of my 28 books, 12 of them were written while I had a full-time job. 10 of them were written while I was traveling 200 days a year
Yeah.
to do corporate-y kind of thing. So for those of you who have day jobs and who have, it's not, the the writer's garret, if paying bills and raising your family are always important, like family is always number one, I think, this gospel according
Amen.
to Gilstrap. So, you can have all things at the same time. There's 24 hours in every day. Tom Clancy was an insurance salesman for a long time. John Grisham was a lawyer for a long time. I was a safety engineer for a long time. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do and still write. And if you're fortunate enough, you make these decisions. So if you find yourself forcing yourself to write, okay, that's great. You're probably not going to be. You will have a fun time writing, and there's all kinds of reasons to write. If you're going to be much like you can be very successful as a duffer. You can be a weekend golfer or a weekend piano player, and you can entertain your friends on the piano. If you're going to be a concert pianist, if you're going to be a successful writer, it does take some time, and it takes some commitment. It takes a lot of failure. It takes thousands and thousands and thousands of words. When people say, I've been working on my novel for 10 years, it's like a gate falls down in my mind that, okay, I'd much rather hear people say, I've written 300 short stories and none of them have been published. Okay, there we go. Now we're talking to somebody who wants to do this, right? The one who's been flogging the same 50,000 words, that's a different thing.
Well, what if it's 200,000 words? Like, is that?
Asking for a friend.
200,000 words in 10 years is not impressive anyway, because it's
Well, that's true. If you've been working on it for 10 years, then give me 500,000 words that won't sell.
Yeah. No, I think
In 10 years.
it takes commitment. I was working all the years through my first, however the hell many books. But it takes commitment and everything you do in your life. Every minute you spend doing something, you're not spending doing something else. So if you're writing, you're not whatever. And so you do have to set your priorities, your family, your health, your, whatever your priorities are. And if writing is not among, those first 3 or 4, then maybe you don't want it that badly. If you're forcing yourself to write, I think, it's probably a mistake. If you force yourself to get up at 4 a.m. because you want to write and that's the only time you have to yourself, that's not a mistake. So it's, but you have to be committed to it. It's like John said, if you're going to be a concert pianist, you're practicing 5 hours a day. That's what it takes. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to be a concert pianist, which is not the worst thing in the world. You're not going to be a writer.
Well, I think it's really an important point to just be, reminding people that nobody starts out as a full-time author. I mean, I wrote a half dozen books, basically on the hour a day plan, because I had young kids. I had a job that was more than a full-time job. And I got an hour a day. And on weekends, as time allowed, I'd work more, but I also, coached my kids' soccer team. And so sometimes that didn't happen. And you can do a lot if you're really focused. And if you're thinking about that book all day because you can't wait to get back to that desk, and you sit down and you work for that hour, it adds up. I mean, there's this P.G. Wodehouse quote that I'm going to butcher, but I think he wrote something like, 380 words a day or just some minuscule amount. But he said, well, every now and then you add them up and you have a book. So, if you don't have a lot of time in your life, as long as you're persistent, you can still write books.
And go ahead.
I want to quote Saint Scott Turow, right? Who wrote Presumed Innocent in 45-minute sections on his commute on a yellow pad, 45 minutes in and 45 minutes out, 5 days a week over 8 years.
Riding the Metro.
Yeah, that was the time he had. And he wasn't going to he went to law school because he knew he couldn't make a living as a writer, but he wasn't going to not be a writer. And so 45 minutes at a time, twice a day. And he came out with Presumed Innocent. It took him 8 years. But so that's the 8-year book, John, that because he was adding to it every day.
Yep.
And that makes sense. So if that's what you have, then use it,
Yeah. Well, that's true. It does. The time's kind of relative, right? I mean, it really is. 13 years, 10 years. Are you writing full time? Are you writing on your commute? Or, what are you doing exactly?
As long as you're writing and not working on,
I hate the term working on, because does that mean you're adjusting your chair height? When you're nowadays, I guess I think we all use a keyboard. When you're on the keyboard, that's when you're working. Also, there's a little bit of time off the keyboard when you're, imagining and ruminating things, but you've got to come back to the keyboard. And you get up, same thing, all of us here. I remember getting up at 5:30, not 4, to get in maybe an hour and a half of writing before I went to a very boring state job. And then at night, I would come back because they had an IBM Selectric typewriter. Oh my God. Nowadays people, Scott Turow had to carry legal pads and pens. Now people are walking around with essentially laptop computers,
right,
that are about the size of their head. So it's for the Scott Turows of the world, of people who are still commuting, it's much easier for you. And but you got to love it. You got to be excited. You got to grab those moments. And the kid coming home with, oh, Dad, I think I only broke my ankle, and you go, what, and you got to take care of stuff like that. But you have to find a way to let the time you can get release the novel that you're trying to write. And it may be you only get initially an hour a day, but it's an hour you gotta relish and take.
This talk at 4 o'clock in the morning brings up my favorite Dorothy Parker quote, which is, "Oh my God, you mean there are 2 9 o'clocks?"
Very good. Very good. So thanks so much. Any parting thoughts on this before we go?
These are always so much fun, Bill.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And
love
thank you for having us, and thank you for everyone who's listening or watching out there. I mean, we hope we've entertained you,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And giving you hope, giving you hope. That's what we do.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah. Awesome. I think we have. I think you guys have been great, and I think it's also helped. I like to temper hope with pragmatism, right? Like, how are the actual steps? What are the actual things you can do? And some people, like, I was never going to be a 4 a.m. writers club or whatever it is, but I would work jobs and I would get super, super good at them. So that first 6 months, all I would do was get great at it. So I could be like Einstein at the patent office, that he spent most of his time working on this theory. I would spend most of my time working fiction. He was doing very useful stuff.
Well, let me go the other way. When during those days, I would have a date with my wife that would start at 9 o'clock. So I would come home from the office. I had a little boy at the time when I was first writing. He would go to bed at 7:30, 8, whatever bedtime was, and we would set up a 9:30 get together. So there'll be an hour and a half in the evening. I am not a morning person, so I would have that hour and a half of writing time. That was my writing time, and then we would get together, and then it would be family time afterwards. So you preserve the family time. You have, everybody gets everything, and then if I still had some oomph left, maybe go till midnight or whatever afterwards. You can achieve everything. You, as Jay said, 20 every moment can count, and you can still have time to sleep.
Absolutely. Awesome. So thanks again so much, guys. It's been a real honor, thrill for me having all of you. It's been a great getting a chance to meet all of you over our different times here and now together. I think we'll call it a show. I know someone has a lasagna to get to, so let's eat that lasagna.
Well baked by this point.
I mean, man, I got.
I'm coming over.
Who's got the lasagna?
I've got
Jim.
and all of you eating at my house, so it's got to be good, because I'm not the one who really baked it.
Extra shot. Question for the audience: what fictional character's death most gutted you? And what's the one that affected you the most? I will answer mine down there in the comments. Please let us know. We would love to hear it. And I have to say a very, very special thanks. I said it in the beginning of the episode. I will say it now. Mr. James Grady coming on. He put me in contact with. I'm shuffling with papers because I'm professional. James literally put me in contact with SJ and everyone that was on that panel. And I need to give some credit here too to Tim Johnson, writes under TD Johnston, who struck up a Facebook friendship with James Grady and was, well, you want to do the show? And so it really is the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon of the show. All almost all referrals or people reaching out. I love having everyone on. But I want to give a very special thanks to Mr. Grady. Thank you for your generosity and kindness and just grace. Taking a chance on our little writers whiskey themed show. And thank to all of you so much out there for watching. if you do love this, I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is not a transactional thing. I'm not asking any writers for money. I don't make money off writers. They don't make money off me. There's no pain either way. So if you do love the show, if you love the writers we have on here, the very best way is to support them by supporting their work. So you want to pick up a book. I know I read Grady's latest novel, The Smoke in Our Eyes, which is just really brilliant. Deserves all the praise it's gotten. That would be a great addition to your bookshelf. I, of course, work really hard. I have a book somewhere over here without expiration, which is eclectic short stories. And I have satirical, more funny ones too, called A Fire for Christmas, which is satirical, loves Christmas, also blows everything up. So if you'd be interested, I would definitely appreciate it and would love to hear your thoughts on it. So thanks again, everyone, for watching. Stay saucy and cheers.